If if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride until they got hungry enough to eat those horses. Then no more rides. Chapter 8. With her father frequently out on the road, canvassing new territories for potential hearing aid buyers, her mother busy preparing other people's taxes, and her friends non existent, Elsbeth had spent a great deal of her young life in solitude. Still, she had never before felt quite so alone as she did now, plodding across the vast flatlands of this strange and eerily quiet place. The earth here was littered with black rocks, varying in size from pebble to boulder. The ground was scarred with thin fissures and wide crevices so deep that darkness hid the bottoms of them and made Elsbeth wonder if there was any end to them at all. She could step or skip over the small ones, but the larger faults required her to alter her course time and time again, taking her along a zigzag path that would more than double the length of the hike. Walking for nearly an hour now, she had long ago discarded Jean when it became apparent that the stick would never shut up. "What do they always say about us?" said Jean. "Sticks and stones will break your bones." What kind of thing is that to tell a child? Sure, I've known some stones in my day, but sticks? It's just not in our nature. Still, they won't even let kids play with us. "Put that stick down," they say. "It'll poke somebody's eye out." As if I would ever do such a thing. It's ridiculous is what it is. And kindling? Don't even get me started on kindling. You want to know what I think? No, I don't, said Elsbeth. As lonely and in need of a weapon as she may have been, she'd finally had enough. She hurled the talking stick end over end into a patch of tall, dry grass. "Hey," called out Jean, "that was not very nice at all. Come back here, you little brat." "Sticks and stones," Elsbeth muttered over her shoulder as she marched onward. Nearing the red cliffs at the far end of Torcano Alley, she felt as though she was finally getting close. The directions thus far were impeccable, and there she was now, standing before the narrow trail that zigzagged its way to the top of the cliff. Still, she hadn't expected the way up to be quite so steep. It seemed better suited to a mountain goat or an alpaca than to an 11-year-old girl who had just walked 3 miles across a fractured desert landscape. She decided that before going on, she would sit for a moment and rest her legs. She found a large rock, and prior to taking a seat upon it, she issued a preemptive warning. "I'm going to sit on you now, and I don't want to hear any back sass," she spouted, taking the tone often directed at her by her know-it-all teachers. Elsbeth lowered herself onto the rock and was both surprised and relieved when it said nothing. Perhaps the rock, like the spoon, spoke only Portuguese. Or it could be that the rock, in awe of Elsbeth's presence, found itself at a complete loss for words. Regardless, her time resting upon it was cut short by a whirring, crunching noise that grew louder by the second. It was as if someone had poured a handful of rocks into a blender and turned it on high. Although she had never before heard anything like it, somehow she found herself blurting out, "Torcano!" She rose quickly, and there it was, no more than a quarter mile away and coming toward her, swirling black and orange, 200 feet in height, from slender foot to wide, hungry mouth. Elsbeth stood, unable to move, mesmerized by its immense beauty and destructive power. The Torcano was sweeping along the face of the cliff, pelting it with rock in both solid and liquid form. Patches of sage and dry grass in its path evaporated like cotton candy in water, instantly without remnant. Elsbeth's heart pumped so furiously she felt as though it might burst right through her sternum. The only safe place to be was at the top of the cliff, but it was clear that she would never make it in time. She'd get halfway up at best, before being instantly cremated like her grandmother, her ashes taken by the breeze and perhaps scattered over the forest and those who had annoyed her. The only other option was to try to outrun it. Without further hesitation, Elsbeth took off, her pudgy arms pumping furiously, her weary feet pounding at the dusty ground. She didn't have to look back over her shoulder to realize she was losing the race. The whirring and crunching grew increasingly loud, and pebbles landed at her feet, still smoking. One hit the back of her arm, and it felt like the sting of a hornet, sharp and deep. She knew there would be others and winced in anticipation. A second smoldering rot hit the back of her leg, singeing her calf and nearly knocking her to the ground. Just when she thought she had taken her last step, she heard a voice calling out from above, "Hey, up here!" She stopped and frantically scanned the cliffside for the source. But in a world of talking sticks, rocks, and bushes, she wasn't sure what she was looking for. When the voice spoke again, saying, "This way," a quick flash caught her eye. About 20 feet up the face of the cliff, she spied the tiny figure of a man, no bigger than a groundhog. The glint of light had been the sun's reflection off the man's shiny dime-sized belt buckle. Nattily dressed in colorful silk, he stood at the mouth of a small cave. Elsbeth wasted no time in scampering up the side of the cliff, clawing at the dry dirt as the Torcano continued its violent pursuit, closing in with incredible speed. "Hurry!" implored the tiny man. Of course she was hurrying, but with every 2 steps up, she slid back another on the steep and crumbly surface. Finally, she lunged forward and with the fingertips of her right hand took hold of a small ledge jutting out from the floor of the cave. She managed to get her left hand upon the ledge as well, but was still unable to pull herself up. The man tried to help by taking hold of her sleeve and tugging with all the might contained within his tiny frame. The small rocks that whizzed past Elsbeth's head were like boulders to the man, yet he did not flee. Instead, he dug in and pulled harder. Another smoldering rock zipped by Elsbeth's ear as the Torcana moved to within 100 feet. She ground her toes into the side of the cliff. "Come on!" groaned the miniature man, his fancy shirt and hat by now soaked with perspiration. Another rock bounced off the back of Elsbeth's hand with a searing pain and an unpleasant sizzle, yet she managed to keep her grip on the ledge. With her arms, she pulled harder. With her legs, she pushed more forcefully until finally she was able to swing one knee and then the other up onto the protruding rock. With a sound of thunder, the Torcano swept across the opening to the cave just as the terrified girl and the man crawled frantically inside. As it passed, small rocks and showers of sparks flew into the cave. Elsbeth and the man shielded their eyes and held their breath as the Torcano moved beyond the cave opening and continued its menacing path down the side of the cliff. When the racket had faded and the dust had settled, the man stood up and wiped the ash from his eyes, unaware at that moment that one of the sparks had done him the extreme dishonor of lighting his pants on fire. "That was the worst Torcano I've ever seen," said the man. "Your pants are on fire," said Elsbeth. "Oh, no lie," the man insisted. "That was a bad one." "No, I mean your pants are literally on fire." The man let go with a squeaky scream and began running around the tiny cave while swatting furiously at his silk-covered backside. Elsbeth reached out with her right hand and smacked the man to the ground, then took a handful of dirt and threw it on him, dousing the flames. It took several moments for the man to regain his breath, and when he did, he sat up and looked at Elsbeth. "Thank you," he said. I must say, unfortunate circumstances aside, it's nice to finally meet you. In fact, I was beginning to think you'd never come." "What are you talking about?" Elsbeth said, coughing up some dust with a dry hack. "Who are you?" "I am the king," said the man as he wiped a layer of ash from his charred pants seat. "Welcome to my castle away from home, as it were." "You're King Cruel?" asked Elsbeth. "King Cruel?" the man scoffed. "I should hope not. That no-good phony. I am the real king, William the Umpteenth." He held out his right hand, which featured a ruby ring on the index finger. Though Elsbeth couldn't be sure, she got that feeling that the man fully expected her to kiss the ring. She did not. Instead, she laughed. "William the Umpteenth?" "Yes," said the man rather defensively. "The Winky family has ruled this land for so long, we've more or less lost track of exact numbers." "Winky family? Wait, William Winky?" "King William, if you don't mind." "You're Wee Willie Winky?" The man clenched his teeth in both fists. He may have been clenching other parts of his body as well, but those were the only visible ones. "Ugh," he growled. "I hate that name. It makes me sound ridiculous. Blast that Cruel and his horrible lies." The man stomped at the dirt and threw a punch at an invisible target. "I don't remember reading anything about you being king," Elsbeth said suspiciously. "Sure you do," Winky insisted. "Good King William runs through the town fleeing from those who would take his crown?" "Nope," said Elsbeth. "Doesn't ring a bell." Unfazed, Winky continued. "Who let them in without a knock? Why is the drawbridge open when it's past 10 o'clock? Elsbeth shook her head. No. In the version I remember, you were just running around putting everyone to sleep. You know, Wee Willie Winky runs through the town, upstairs and downstairs in his nightgown." "Nonsense," said Winky. "I readily admit I may not be the most dynamic public speaker, but I don't believe I've ever put anyone to sleep. In fact, I think I'm an excellent conversationalist. Or at least I used to be. I'm a bit out of practice. It's been quite lonely here, as you might imagine." "Isn't there a Mrs. Winky you can talk to?" asked Elsbeth. Winky sighed. "Alas, no. And not for lack of trying on my part. You can be sure of that. However, it seems that women prefer a somewhat taller gentleman, not to mention one with a bit more up top. He removed his hat and ran his right hand over the smooth, shiny surface of his hairless head. If it's someone to talk to you're looking for, why don't you move to the suburbs? Asked Elsbeth. There are hundreds of people to talk to out there. As much as I'd like to, said Winky, I'm afraid it would put everyone in great danger. You see, Cruel wants me dead, for reasons I'm sure you can imagine. As I live, so does a prophecy. There it was again, that word. What do you mean, before? Elsbeth asked, when you said you thought I'd never come. As he repositioned his hat upon his bald skull, the sadness instantly left his face, replaced by a sly grin. He leaned in, like someone about to tell an off-color joke, and said, I know who you are. You're Elsbeth Puel. Of all the things Elsbeth had thus far encountered, including talking sticks, bushes, and rocks, this was the one that confounded her most. Where did you hear that? She said. I haven't told anyone my name since I got here. For many years I've waited, said William, becoming giddier by the second. I'd almost given up hope that you'd find me, but here you are. I didn't find you, said Elsbeth. You found me, remember? A mere technicality, said the wee former king. Regardless, there's no doubt that you are the one. The one what? The one about whom it is written, of course. The great warrior who will come and vanquish the evil Cruel and restore me to my rightful place upon the throne. Wee Willie Winky, Lightful's little star, Winky Winky little star, how Cruel wonders where you are. Sitting in his castle high, feasting on a blackbird pie. Winky Winky little czar, how Cruel wonders where you are.